Hi, I'm Jay Hetherington with Football Alberta. I'm bringing you an item called 5 Minutes of Football History to you today. What it is an oral history vignette of a specific part of our football past. Hope you enjoy it. We're here with Coach Poleniak, who is a longtime scout and football enthusiast and coach in Alberta. And he's also with a group of people who are trying to make a written history and a bit of an oral history of football in Alberta. And we're here to talk about the 1967 Wildcats. What was special about that team?
It was interesting. I'd come from a city champion, Victoria Composite. And, I played both ways, and I anticipated I would just step in there and be a star. The previous year, they came close to going to the Nationals again, and a lot of veterans were back and very hungry. So I came into a team that had a lot of returning veterans. And right off the bat, I sort of gelled with them because I came from a tough school. And in those days, we had no open boundaries in junior. So there were certain conferences, and in our conference, the drawing circle would be St. Joe's, it would be East Glen, it would be Austin O'Brien, Victoria Composite, Queen E. So the majority of the team came from three schools, and that was East Glen, and O'Leary, and Victoria Composite.
Okay, so it was a kind of a real Northside team, wasn't it?
Yeah, but I was an anomaly because I live on the south side, but I had to play at Vic because Bonnie Dunan-Scona was overloaded.
Oh, I see.
So Victoria's early successes in football, we had 6 kids from Ritchie that were starters in the Victoria thing. But when I came out of high school, because I had played there, I had to wear the Wildcats, even though I lived on the south side.
Oh, so it was a long hike for you to get to practice.
That's correct.
Okay. What was the atmosphere like for you as a rookie joining the team?
I was respected probably to start off with because I came from a city champion. But the runner-up in that championship game was East Glen. 5 players from East Glen also made the team. At that time, the schools I was talking about collectively had better prospects or better players that were established. So I was, because I worked hard, I was accepted, but we weren't allowed to carry 40 people. There was a lot of outstanding football players that did not make that team.
Right. So can you tell me a little bit more about that team? That team was really quite special.
It was quite special, and the atmosphere was very interesting because we used to practice out of the old Clark Stadium before it became Clark Park. And the Eskimos' dressing room was across the field. And they had a whirlpool. So if you had an injury, our trainer would refer us over there. So a lot of guys faked injuries so they could be around Eskimos. And so you felt something special because you're very close to a professional team. And then their practice field was one field beyond us. So that made us work harder because when they walked by after practice, we always thought they came to watch us, which was not true. But we came from a very hard-nosed culture. It was, the team was a very smash-mouth kind of team, very physical. They reminded me a lot of last year's Winnipeg Blue Bombers, outstanding defense, and not really a big play offense. The offense was a continuous offense where you'd march down the field, and you had 2 very capable quarterbacks. And once again, you had a lot of veterans that had been through the wars. And
so they had their high degree of experience on those teams. And how did they do during the regular season in the Alberta League?
The Alberta League at that time was comprised of Calgary Colts. They were called the North Hill Colts. The year before, Calgary Wranglers existed, but they changed their name to Mohawks. They got a corporate sponsor. You had the Edmonton Huskies and the Wildcats. So basically, it was a 2-team race all along. And in the final, we played the Huskies and won 2 close games. They could have gone either way. There wasn't much separation between both 2 teams. And became easier when we went to Vancouver for our quarterfinal game.
It became easier when you went to Vancouver for your quarterfinal game?
Because they weren't as good as the Huskies.
Ah, I see. So the rivalry within the Alberta League was strong with strong players.
but basically Huskies, Wildcats. There was a cream of the crop. There was no contention on that one.
And so take us through the trip through the beginnings of the outside of the Alberta League move towards the national championships.
The first game we had to play in terms of the stepping stones to get to the Nationals was the Vancouver Blue Bombers. And traditionally that had been a pretty decent team. They had been competitive in a lot of the Western quarterfinals, but we took a train trip.
You went by train rather than flying,
Yeah,
or a bus.
We took a train, and we played Vancouver Blue Bombers. I remember staying at the Sylvia Hotel.
Oh, yes.
And we beat Vancouver 30-6, and an epic train trip coming back to Edmonton. I think people could use their imagination if they know how to celebrate of some things that might happen.
This is a family show, so we're not going to do that. Okay.
So the next step was we were hosting the Western Final against the Saskatoon Hilltops.
Okay, so you came back by train.
Yeah.
What kind of experience was it coming back by train? Takes a long time, right? It's not like a 1 hour flight. So did you have to sleep overnight on the train, or what happened?
You know what? I guess whoever wanted to sleep would just in their berths would catch cat nap, but there wasn't very little sleeping going on there. It was just everybody was tired and happy. And then we had a lot of passengers on the train that sort of became friends.
Oh, excellent.
They weren't football fans, and so there was a lot of that going on there, and normal celebrations. But it was like you could take a thermometer to measure joy. You would hit the top of the thermometer.
So it was a great road trip.
Yeah.
Okay. I wonder if teams that fly miss out on that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So tell me a little bit more about the next game you were hosting.
We hosted the Saskatoon Hilltops and won that game 16-11.
Wow,
Close game, but once again, it gets back to what I was saying, our defense, you were not going to get a big play for a scoring, opportunity on our defense. So you go back to Vancouver, 6 points we allowed against a pretty good offense, 11 against the Hilltops. And they were a very good team and everything, but then our defense pulled us through so we could advance to the Canadian Championship final, which was held in Regina.
So you mentioned that you had two quarterbacks. Can you recall who they were?
We had Al Melanchuk.
Oh, yes.
Who had been a quarterback when Bob Dean came to Vic. Al Melanchuk never continued with football after. He went to star in the Alberta Golden Bears basketball team.
Right.
His brother was known also, Don Melanchuk. In circles. Another quarterback was a rookie from Eastland, Don Tallis.
Don Tallis, I know him well.
And Don Tallis was a great athlete because he went on to play as a defensive back with the Alberta Golden Bears. And he was drafted as a defensive back in the CFL draft.
He is still an incredible athlete, but he's getting on in years. That's right. So tell me, what was the next step after Saskatchewan?
Well, we flew to Regina to play the Burlington Braves.
So was that the first time you ever flew?
That is correct.
What was that like?
We're so excited to get to Regina. It's when are we here yet? Are we here yet? And, but I wasn't the only person that had never flown. I think there's quite a few people that hadn't flown. And the Edmonton Wildcat organization, their board was quite strong, and they made sure everybody that was on the active roster was going to be attending the Nationals. Then when we got there, they arranged for us to watch a playoff games. The Eskimos were playing the Rough Riders at Old Taylor Field. So they put us in the end zone to watch, and that was our first, touch of football prior to the game.
And so tell me more about the game.
Well, Burlington Braves were coached by Bertie Custis, who's in the CFL Hall of Fame.
Right.
And they scored first. But once again, our defense came through and we won 29-6.
Wow.
And our defense, similar to the Blue Bombers of the last couple of years, was giving the offense good field position all the time. And sort of a theme that whole year was the Wildcats very rarely had to come from behind to win the game. And, that was a tribute to everybody, but it was an exceptional defense. On that particular team, when you took everybody, there was 12 of us went to play college football down the road. And all the 12 that went to college football, we all were starters. We were not somebody who was just a roster player.
Mm-hmm. So can you tell us any more about that day and your feelings and how it wound up?
Well, when we came to the banquet, we didn't realize how big Burlington was. We thought that they were a pro team, when you walked around, because, for example, somebody you knew, Ron Solomon, was not a big player. He was about 190 pounds, and he was playing offensive guard. But in modern warfare, precision seems to be more important than power. Precision and speed, and that's what we had. We were overall more athletic than the Burlington Braves. Mm-hmm. And it was a surprise, not so much that we won, but with the score that we had won by. Mm-hmm. And once again, it was interesting flying back. We had some delays in flying back for various reasons.
So could you give me the score in that game one more time?
29-6.
29-6.
Over Burlington Braves.
Yeah, and you just kind of overpowered them, didn't you?
Yeah, I think too is psychologically, from what I understood, they were used to getting early leads in games. Mm-hmm. And they were in a shock when we started. That's the first time I can remember we came back from behind, right, even though it was only 6 points. Right. And they didn't handle it very well. There's a psychological element. Right. And we were quicker. From what I understood, the Huskies of the early 60s were a precision and a quick team. Mm-hmm. So that was probably one of the trademarks of what our Wildcat team was comprised of: quickness and,
quickness rather than flat out speed.
Yeah.
Precision.
Yeah.
Excellent coaching. Who are your coaches?
The coaches were Pierre Turgeon took over as coach. He had coached O'Leary High School. Mm-hmm. So he was an okay head coach, but he had an outstanding assistant coaching staff. Gary Naylor, who was responsible for me to go to Manitoba, was on that coaching staff. They had Steve Egbert, who was a terrific coach. He went later on to coach back with the Huskies. We had Jack Patterson that was helping big time with Austin O'Brien establish a program into a quality program. And we had Des Murphy doing the defensive backs, who had sort of been a fringe CFL player. And also I played with the Edmonton Prospectors, which was a senior team that we had in Edmonton in the early 60s.
So you had senior football going at that time as well as junior football?
No, prior to that.
Oh, prior to that.
It had disappeared.
I see. Okay.
But talking to some of the veterans, people would know Daryl Checkhead.
Right.
And he mentioned there was a huge upgrade on the depth of the coaching staff from 66, which had Mike Laschek as coach. Right. They had Mike Kamek, who had been an Eskimo. Mm-hmm. But other than that, they inherited a lot of coaches that really weren't football people. So a lot of times the development was slow because Mike Laschek would start walking around to the weak coaches and take over. Mm-hmm. So it was a huge upgrade and from the coaching staff in terms of all areas.
Sounds as if it was a system that pulled together, especially at that time, during 1967.
I would agree with that, yeah.
Yeah, and so it was probably a great experience for you to be on that team for the rest of the time.
Well, it was great for me because I came from great head coach Bob Dean at Vic.
Correct.
Legendary. So I was fortunate, coming from Bob Dean, good coaching staff, and then I went to Manitoba. Well, Canadian champions, but we had a bunch of ex-bombers that had played for Bud Grant. Mm-hmm. And they were all hard-nosed coaches. It's all black and white. So over the years that I played, very rarely did I not have what I consider very good coaches.
Okay. So once again, this is the 1967 Wildcats.
That's correct.
Excellent, excellent drive through that time, a walk through that time, a good vignette. Coach, I'd like to thank you very much for being here and for this opportunity to learn a little bit about the great Edmonton Wildcats.
Well, I enjoyed the opportunity because a lot of people don't know much about that particular team, and if I can contribute, I'm happy to do so.
Thank you. Thank you for watching Football Alberta's 5 Minutes of Football History. The recollections of the participants are subject to the limitations of human memory, and their opinions are entirely their own and not necessarily that of Football Alberta.